From Florida's Space Coast, this is Your Career.
Welcome to Your Career. I'm Debbie Featherston, your host, and with me today is Christopher Robinson. Christopher is a consultant, and I am so delighted that you have joined us because your specialty is leadership, and what we really want to focus on is the team development aspect. So, what's the importance of leadership in developing teams?
I believe John Maxwell put it best. Everything rises and falls on leadership. And I believe if a team is going to move forward, then that leader, whether it be the former leader or the informal leader, has to play a very integral part in helping to move the team forward. They've got to be able to set the vision for the team and help the team understand their roles as a part of moving that vision forward. So leadership is a very integral part of that process. And to put it in a sports analogy, anytime the team does not do well, they don't necessarily fire the star quarterback.
It's true.
They don't necessarily fire the star player on the team. Typically what happens, they fire the coach. And the reason why, the coach failed to maximize the effort and output of that team and the people and the folks on that team. So leadership is a very, very important part of any team. And it's a definite must.
You know, if you were writing a recipe about for building effective teams, what would be some of the critical ingredients?
I think the first thing that I would want to include on a team is have a diverse team. You've got to have a team composed of people from various backgrounds, different perspectives, different ways of approaching problems and solving those problems. You need innovators, you need creators, folks who are able to take the ball and basically, as they say, run with it. And so you've got to have a collection of folks from all over and then somehow help them understand how you move them from being independent to being interdependent, so they lean on one another and not so much on their own individual talent. And so how do we focus and harness that and leverage that to the point where they actually meet the goal that's set forward by the leader?
Yeah, I love that because you're talking about really leaning on each other. So recognizing what our talents are and the diversity that we all bring to the team, right?
I think a team achieving excellence is having a clear goal. I've been a part of teams where it was a little bit ambiguous as far as the goal or the vision was concerned. And that resulted in a lot of murmuring, discord, dysfunction as a whole as a team. We couldn't see what the end goal was. So you've got to have a leader who is able to effectively communicate and help us understand that macro point of view. And bring it down to a micro point of view so that we can see where we are and what our lanes are and clearly define roles and lanes so that we can achieve the goal that's set before us.
And I see that to me, that's one of the greater challenges is lack of role clarification, but we'll probe that in just a little bit. I'm curious, Christopher, as you have the opportunity to really manage people managers, right, no matter what level, what's some general pointers or advice that you give them that helps them to be most effective in leading these teams?
I think encouragement. I think you have to spend some time encouraging your folks, helping them understand that you're there for them, that they can trust you, and trust that you're going to provide them that cover, that it's okay to make a mistake from time to time. And we can always recover, but I need to know that you have my back. And if I don't feel that, and if the team does not feel that as a whole, you're not going to have a team. You're going to have a collective bunch of individuals not operating and functioning as a team. So trust is really, truly the essence here. And if I can get that and help the team understand that it's reciprocal, and that I trust you and you have to trust me, and I have to earn that trust, I have to show and display that trust, that's critical. Because no team is going to put forth their best effort if they can't trust the leadership at the top.
What have you found that has really helped a leader, a people leader, to cultivate that culture of diversity and helping people on the team to value diversity in their team members versus, you have this competitiveness or strife?
I think one of the things that we can do to help, and some of the things I've done in the past to help people understand and value diversity, is we usually do exercises that will allow us to highlight our strengths. And we would go around the room and just hey, tell me a little bit about who you are. And as we go through that exercise, we come back and we find that everyone has a very unique skill set.
Right.
There's something unique about everyone. And they can bring that to the table to help the team. If we can somehow help others see, and as a result of that exercise, see the value of the uniqueness that everyone brings to the table and the talents that they bring to the table, we're able to have a conversation, a deeper conversation as to how we can leverage that and use that for the greater good or for the benefit of achieving the mission or the goal or objectives that we have laid before us. So I think that's critical, is having an opportunity to have exercises that really help to kind of flesh out those talents, those gifts that those individuals have, and have that leader help them understand how we can move them from being independent to being interdependent upon one another. That would be key to helping bridge that gap.
Right. I'm thinking that it would help to create better morale, right? That cohesiveness and productivity as a team that's so desired and needed, that those all would be helpful. While we're on this subject, I'm just curious, I've heard from time to time some debate around, well, this is a good team, that's a good team. So in your opinion, what makes it, which would be a better team? Is it a team that's really highly diversified, or is it a team that's more homogeneous?
I think it just depends on the task. If you're looking for creativity, innovativeness, I think a more diverse team is probably going to be your best bet. But if you have a set project already in place, then a homogeneous team could definitely meet that task. Keep in mind, with diverse teams, there's going to be conflict. Well, and there's going to be conflict in any team. How you manage that conflict, I mean, as the old saying goes, conflict is inevitable. You're not going to be able to avoid that. But what you have to do is have leadership in place that is able to manage that conflict and help people work through that conflict. One of my mentors used to always tell me, Chris, how are you leading through that? I don't want to hear excuses as to why this person doesn't get along with that person, or why this person doesn't like this person, or because this person's perspective is not the same as this person's perspective. We need to find some common ground as to how we can work collaboratively together to meet the objective that has been levied upon us.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm just curious, when we really look, you've moved into a territory that I'd like to explore a little bit more, and that is a challenge. And conflict is one of those challenges that's inevitable on a team. Are there other common kinds of challenges that you can expect?
Communication. I think communication and self-centeredness are two probably the biggest culprits of destroying any relationship, whether it be personal or professional. So this bleeds over into the personal side of the house as well. I think we have to have people have a serious conversation, a very transparent and open conversation about who they are, what their perspective is, how do we help them take away, or rather lose that sense of self to some degree for the greater good of the team, and recognize that it's about us. We can do more together collectively than we can do individually. And then how do you help them better communicate with one another? There are various tools out there that I believe that will help people understand a little bit about who they are. And
what are some of those? Do you want to tell me a little bit more
about those? One of the tools that I used to use when I was in the Air Force was a Thomas Kilmann conflict instrument. And it's a great tool because it helps you to understand what is your default conflict, or how do you deal with or manage conflict.
What's my natural go-to is the way I would express that.
Are you the competing? Are you the accommodating? Are you the compromising? Which one are you? And as a result of understanding, and competitive, as a result of understanding that, you also understand that this is my default that I go to when I'm faced in a situation, but how do I use that to better understand the people who are around me, who are working side by side with me and across from me.
Sure.
And so that is a tool, I believe, that helps you understand not only who you are as part of the self-awareness piece, but also helps you to understand others. How do you move from the interpersonal to the interpersonal portion of your communication? And so that's a great tool. One of the other tools that I'm a fan of, if you will, would be the DISC.
Okay.
The DISC personal profile, because I believe that personal profile helps you to understand whether you're the dominant individual, whether you're the individual that's conscientious. You know, it helps you to understand who you are and how you typically work. It's just your habits, how you typically operate. It's not necessarily your personality trait or type, but it's how you typically behave in most work settings, or your ideal work setting in which you tend to thrive in.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up the DISC, because the DISC, the TKI in both cases, and the MBTI in all those cases, you could put a team profile together, right? And then I think it's always fun and interesting when you put those together and then you find out, you look at the team and you say, well, tell me, you know, given this, what would you think is working well?
That's right.
Or where's our gaps? And it's very interesting to get their perspective then on their team.
And it's amazing, the light bulb goes off and people have that aha moment where they, wow, I didn't know this about myself. Oh man, I didn't know that about you. So this is the reason why we've had this disconnect. And I've had people say, hey, Chris, you think you might be able to come to my house and conduct this session with my family, because I'm having a really difficult time. And I said, no, I don't know if I necessarily want to do that. But I believe you have all the tools that you need to go home and help your family become a better unit as far as how they communicate with one another. As a result of that.
You know, when you're thinking about forming new teams, right, we were talking about having maybe a new manager, a new leader, or you've got maybe a seasoned leader, but you've got a need to put a team together real quick. I can remember back just a few years ago when FPL had a huge project up at the Space Center, and they had to put together some really teams rather quickly. What are some advice or you know, to help new leaders avoid obstacles or challenges that they might encounter when forming those new teams?
That's a great question. And I think part of that problem is we have a tendency to bring in the people that we know, the people we have a relationship with already, the people who are already, their line of thinking is the same as ours.
Sure, oh boy.
And so, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting the same. Different. It's just not going to happen. You need to make sure that you invite people from every level throughout the organization in order to truly capture and leverage that human capital. If you don't do that and you just invite those folks who think like you, who perhaps sometimes even look like you, that's not going to necessarily be what I would think and comprise a great team.
Well, I imagine based on your experience, because you've worked for years with developing teams in a variety of different situations. So, you know, that really doesn't hold any surprise to me. I'm curious, you know, when you're thinking about, and I'm going to reflect back a few years when I had a major project with a large defense contractor, and we were putting together a learning and development center with this organization, about 1,800. I think it was like 600 union, and then, you know, the rest was professional staff. So the question or the issue that I found interesting here when we're looking at teams was we wanted to put together some champions, right? So you got a new team, you got a new initiative, in this case a whole new division, you wanted people, so you wanted to get some champions together. We put together a charter. Have you found that to work very well? We chartered the team, you know, to make certain that everybody was on the same page, we were really united, we truly shared a strong voice in championing the Learning and Development Center that was going into place.
I think that does work. I've had experience with that where you've gone out and you've put that charter together because you have people who are very passionate about moving this objective or goal or mission forward. So I think that works out very well. Sometimes there are people, and again, it goes back to how the information flows, making sure everyone has an opportunity to be a part of that charter. And so we've got to move to a point where we're more inclusive in that regards. And just to give you an example, I was a part of a think tank a couple of years ago, and where I was invited to talk about education and what we can do to transform our institution to where we were able to meet some of the goals of the 21st century. I mean, how are we going to change some of the platforms that we have currently right now and truly be innovative and creative about how we educate our folks? And one of the things that I found as a part of that think tank, there were several folks that were just not included necessarily with that from an operational or level.
Certainly.
You know, folks who are on the ground who are actually putting it putting it in play.
Right.
And as a result of that, I felt that we did not necessarily meet the mark because we weren't or not necessarily as inclusive as we could have been, in which that feedback was channeled up, and that certainly was changed.
How did that impact the success of that operation?
Well, initially we got some of the same old responses. So we really didn't get the kind of churn that we were expecting. But eventually, after going back, that feedback got to senior leadership, and senior leadership went back and said, hey, look, I need you to make a more concerted effort to include and expand and cast that net even wider to capture that. And it also helps with something that the Center of Creative Leadership put out several years ago called cross-cultural mentorship.
Certainly.
And it goes back to my point that I mentioned earlier. Sometimes we tend to invite those on our team who have the same perspective as we do, who think like we do, and sometimes even look like us. So in order for us to truly capture and harness that diversity, cross-cultural mentorship is something that has to happen. And the Center of Creative Leadership laid that out in their handbook very well, and I really am a big fan of how they did that, because I look at my experiences in the military and I say to myself, I have been the benefactor of a lot of that growing up, and my experiences in the military has a lot to do with the cross-cultural mentorship that I have received, and just mentorship in general, to help me become the man in the Air Force that I was once.
That's awesome. What a great foundation, because I feel that the military has done a phenomenal job in providing training and mentoring of people. So, you know, knowing that that's your root, I know that you've got a strong foundation in this and just solid education in the most current methodologies. Now, I'm curious, Chris, what would you say, can you just share with us maybe one or two different team building activities that you shared with us some tools about, you know, for communication, actually how to deal with conflict, not so much communication. The MBTI and the DISC give us a little bit of feel of that. But I'm just curious, are there some particular team building activities that you've seen work, and maybe give us an example, share with us a story?
Sure. And I like that. That's great. One of the things that I would do an exercise with a penny. And I would have everybody pull out a penny, or I would provide them a penny. And with that penny, I would ask them to share something from the date on that penny. Share something significant that happened to you based on the year on that penny. That's one of the exercises that I used. And it served twofold. It was an opportunity for them to be transparent and to build some trust.
Right.
Because if you're going to share something about who you are with a bunch of strangers, that's the building block to building trust within that unit. And the next part of that was to help them understand a little bit more of the background of the individuals in which they were going to be working with, to help them better pinpoint, hey, you know, this person has a talent in this particular area. Wow, I don't necessarily have that talent in that area. And as I believe it was Walsh, the coach of the 49ers several years ago, don't tell me what the person can't do. Tell me what he can do. And we as a team will cover those areas in which that individual does not have necessarily as a strength. So that was critical as a part of opening the dialogue, that is.
Yeah.
And my next exercise.
But I think it's not just opening the dialogue, but I think from what you've just shared, it's a way to really get to know the other people
Sure.
on your team. Because I could see with that, if somebody says 1969, their response could give me a clue as to their generation, their experience, life experience, maybe their upbringing even, where they were and what maybe might be an event that really impacted them in some way.
And I'm glad you pointed that out, generation, because in most workplaces today, organizations, we're talking about baby boomer generation, Generation X, and millennial. In some cases, the builder generation, all in the workplace, all at the same time. So how do you as a leader, or how do you function on that team when you have various generations in the workplace or in that organization? So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an issue sometimes because when you go in to do team building, the conflict and the tension is between generations. You know, the older generation, the boomer or the builder, really is having a difficult time with these kids.
I think
They may be 30, but they're kids.
No, you're right. I think it was Marcus Buckingham, I think, that put out an article dealing with generations several years ago. And one of the things that I don't believe is happening, we don't have the cross-cultural generational conversations that we should. We need to do more of that. And this whole thing of the entitlement generation, there may be some truths to that, but I think a lot of that has to do with how we were not only engaged that generation, but we've got to move away from those perceptions that we have about that generation, because I believe in my heart that people want to grow. They want to exceed your expectations in most cases. No one wakes up and says to them, you know, I want to fail today. I don't want to do my best today. You know, so we have a responsibility as leaders to help unlock the greatness within people.
Absolutely. And your comment to me goes right back to one of our earlier questions about valuing differences and how do you create a culture to help to really be assured that you are your team members are valuing differences, right? So you love technology and I don't. You know, how can I embrace and leverage those differences, right? Just as a simple example, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, moving forward, we've got about 4 or 5 minutes, and I'm just curious, what would you do to try to help to accelerate the cohesiveness of a team? You know, if I've got to get a team put together quickly, any specific things that come to mind?
I think the first thing that I would do is conduct an assessment, an assessment of that team. I think I would have each one of the team members take a assessment that would measure who they are or what is their typical role that they play on a team. One that comes to mind is Team Dimension. Team Dimension has the CARE, is the acronym.
Is that a DDI instrument?
It is, yes. And I think CARE stands for Creator, Advancer, Refiner, and Executor. And in that assessment, each individual has an opportunity to try, well, the assessment will definitely pinpoint which area are they in. Are they a creator naturally? Are they an advancer naturally? Are they the refiner naturally? Are they the executor naturally? And it helps them understand their roles. Once you do that and you find out what your role is and what your strength is, then you're able to leverage that for the greater good of the team.
I love that. There's a card deck that I've gotten introduced to where it's very similar to that, where the individuals can sit and sort through it, but it's 52 cards and they can determine how are they really contributing. Right? Are they building team spirit? Are they managing boundaries? So forth. So it's very helpful. And whether you call them core activities or competencies that make up a team, that's huge. I love that exercise. I wasn't as familiar with that as I thought I was.
And then once you move from that, then there's other, of course, you can go through the stages of team development, and there's several out there.
Sure, absolutely. Because I think what you're talking about here, Chris, also is a great step, maybe a first step, to help someone who's new to a team figure out their niche. How can they really fit in? How can they really make that contribution to the team? Any other suggestions looking at it from the individual team member's perspective when they're joining a team and they're trying to figure out how do I fit in and how do I carve out that role where I can really make a difference?
I'm glad you asked that. I think one of the things you have to deal with as a leader, you've got to deal with their fears and their trepidation about being a part of a team. Because it's you're not going to be able to avoid it. You're going to have someone who's probably skeptical about being a part of a team.
Sure.
Perhaps because they've been bruised by being a part of a team at some point in time where they felt they were on a team and then the team really just kind of let them down. They kind of let them kind of wander and fend for themselves. And
throw them under the bus, whatever.
Yeah, and they have tread marks still on their chest.
Yes.
As a result of that.
I've met a few of those.
Yes. And so we've got to help, rebuild. I think that's the biggest part of a leader in that process is helping to rebuild and encourage and build your people. Are you building into people? Yeah. What are you really doing? Yeah. Or are you just a figurehead? Yeah. Because if they see it's all about you, they will quickly turn away and say, you know what, I don't want to have any part of this.
Right, they'll just disengage, won't
yes,
they? You'll
absolutely.
see a drop in productivity and morale. Chris, I wish we had more time, and I'd love to have you back at some point in the future to talk about something you've mentioned at least 3 times in our conversation that I find vital, and that is trust, building trust in a team. And it's such a huge problem today. Well, on behalf of my guest and everyone here on the set at Your Career, thank you for watching, and remember, be career happy.
More information about this program is available online at millermediagroup.org.